Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The Boys Season 4 Episode 8. It is called Season 4 Finale. I mean, you're probably thinking that's a weird title. I thought that was weird too, so I looked into this, and the reason for this was I actually kind of guessed before I found the answer, which is the title was originally called Assassination Run. And while I didn't, figure out what the exact original title was, I assumed it was changed because of real world events in the past week, which I'm not going to go into. There was even speculation after last Saturday if they were going to delay the episode and whatever, right? Because obviously, getting into the finale, we all knew that there was going to be some attempted assassination in the episode. Having seen the episode, I get why they didn't feel the need to delay it, because honestly, nothing in it's really that similar to the real world events, and ultimately, there's actually very little crossover, but you can understand why going into the finale you thought, oh, maybe there'll be some similar moments to what happened last Saturday. But regardless, let's just get that out of the way, and that's why we've got a weird title for the last episode. So that's the one thing they seem to have changed. Based, I mean, maybe they altered like a little line or something somewhere in the edit, but I don't know. It didn't feel like anything was changed. It felt like the plot was so revolving around the outcome that happens. I don't think anything meaningful in the episode changed, because of what happened last weekend. But regardless, we got the boys finale. Spoilers, of course, for the episode as always. And I would say there's a lot of things in this episode that I quite like. There's a lot of good character moments. There's a lot of big moments, and I enjoyed a lot of it. But much like this season as a whole, it was a little bit more mixed than I was hoping for. There's definitely some things that stuck out to me, feeling a little bit weird or rushed or lazy. I'll get into those. One particular thing really bugged me, but I like the direction that it's more or less heading in, getting into the final season, and there is definitely some big, exciting stuff in the episode and where all the characters kind of end up. But there's definitely some ups and downs, and I think the first thing I want to talk about is probably the whole doppelganger, shapeshifter, Annie, plot, which leads to the actual assassination attempt. So it's kind of a big part of the first half or so of the episode, is all this stuff. And it gets extra cruel because this character then proposes to Hughie, and we actually knew that he already had an engagement ring on him from earlier in the season. So it kind of becomes this weird double proposal, and it would be a very sweet scene if we didn't already know that this was a shapeshifter and that this wasn't really Annie. So it's got this obviously underlying feeling of ugh for the audience. So that's all fine and well, and we even get to see real Annie with fake Annie, where the shapeshifter goes back to her and kind of mocks her and brags about having sex with Hughie and about getting engaged, and it's really demented. And it's actually one of my favorite scenes of the episode. I felt like Erin Moriarty was having fun playing both versions of the role. I feel like whenever you get a TV show that lasts a while, and this was especially true back in the days when you had 22 episodes per season for every show, I think actors always get to enjoy when they do an episode where they're mind controlled, or they're playing a shapeshifter version of themselves, or they're playing like a body swap, or anything that lets them play a different character effectively in some way and sort of poke fun of their regular character. I think they always get a kick out of that, and I felt like she was kind of flexing her muscles a bit here and doing some different stuff. I enjoyed this back and forth between them, and also just this horrific plan that she's going to kill the new president with Annie's face, so Annie's going to be the one that's blamed for it. Now, admittedly, given the world they're in, I feel like proving that it's not actually Annie doesn't seem like it would be that impossible, but still, the intent is there, and it's really solid. I like that stuff. I also liked all the stuff in the secret bunker. Once they get down there, with Hughie realizing that she says something about it being a furnace in here, and he remembers the shapeshifter saying that the first time they met her, and then remembers all the little hints and moments that stuck out to him as, oh, that's a little out of character, that's different, that's whatever. And we also have it established as well that this shapeshifter does read the mind of the person she's taking the face from. Like, when she's touching it, at the very least, she gets information from them. And, literally understands something Annie's saying or thinking at one point in the scene with her. So I like that too, because it was a bit more, because normally with shapeshifter stories, the one obvious tell sign is that the shapeshifter has to try and bluff and pretend to be the person. because, well, they can look like the person, they can't know everything that person knew. This is actually quite an insidious version of this plot, because the shapeshifter can know and do things and say personal information that proves who they are. Like, it's a lot more intricate, the things they have to spot. Like, the Huey in this case would have to spot to notice that it's not really her. Little things that they wouldn't think of, because they're not necessarily memories so much as they're just habit. They're just something that Annie does without thinking, and that's the stuff the shapeshifter, even having read her mind, can never replicate. I really like that aspect to it. I do think overall, though, this all does feel a little bit rushed, in the sense that I'm not saying I wanted like 4 episodes of fake Annie and Huey together and fake doppelganger Annie being on the team and being up to shit. But we only just found out she was taken by the shapeshifter in the final few minutes of the previous episode. And we wrap it all up by about 30 minutes into this episode. It does feel like it goes very, very quick, and I like the scenes where the two Annies were on screen together. I think there was maybe a little bit more they could have done, and, you know, at the very least, I think having the Switch reveal moment maybe at the end of the prior episode, so we could get a full episode of the shapeshifter having infiltrated everyone, and what are they going to do? Maybe a bit more scenes with Annie being caged up, you know, and chained to the floor. I think there could have been a bit more there. Admittedly, I'm not sure what you would be doing with all that time necessarily. It's just to say that it feels like it is very quick. I also have to question how Annie knows where to go when she basically cut or ruins her wrists by pulling her arms out of the shackles, because she just shows up at this secret bunker, and they made a point of showing us that says to fake Annie and Huey, "Hey, I'm sending you coordinates." So I don't know how real Annie got those coordinates and knew where to go, unless someone left a phone back at the apartment or something, but that seems a bit silly from a tactical and security point of view. But yeah, the fight I liked. I liked Huey realizing, I liked him trying to like get Kimiko to come over and fight her, but slyly. And of course, Kimiko has no idea what he's signaling for, because she has no idea that Annie's the shapeshifter. My favorite part of the realization, though, is when he tells MM. And there's a moment specifically where they're trying to keep calm, and MM's like getting agitated, so is Huey, and like they're trying to stay calm, and then the doppelganger, the shapeshifter, walks back into frame, and I swear the way MM switches to a "hey" really made me laugh, because I don't think I've ever seen MM smile like that before, which just kind of points out that he's not being natural. This is not natural MM, right? This was like a fake smile, and it really made me laugh. It was one of those little moments that The Boys really does well, that I got a lot out of. And then when real Annie shows up, that's, you know, a fun fight too. As is just some of the carnage, as per usual. The shapeshifter throws one of the security guards against like a cabinet, and the guy's back just bends like the opposite way. I'm a gore person. I love that shit. It's great. I've got a couple critiques though with the Annie plot in this episode, right? One's a sort of little just annoying thing, and the other is kind of a bit bigger. The little thing is that I don't understand why her powers don't come back in a big dramatic way to win this fight. I feel like that would make a lot more sense to me. Maybe it's a little bit more cliched, but it would at least feel like it was a big moment. Instead, they just seemingly kind of like come back in the montage towards the end when they're driving away, and it's just they're just back now. And convenient, because she's going to need them like 10 seconds after that. That just felt really weird, and especially since we've been doing a lot of, our powers have been out for several episodes, it didn't feel like a big dramatic moment right before that would sort of say that she's mentally in a place where she's got her powers back. You know, kind of in like a Spider-Man No More style story where his powers sort of kick back in and it was all just like a mental block, right? That's fine, but like I need like sort of more of a build up and sort of emotional thing, and maybe the idea that, you know, the shapeshifter was going to hurt someone she cared about, you know, in the fight might have been a better moment for her to like find the power again and sort of blast, you know, full energy at her or something. So that was like the weird little thing. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but I did sort of go, wait, that's it? They're just back now at the end? It felt a bit weird to do it in that montage towards the end. You know, it's one of a couple of things that feel a little bit weirdly underwhelming in how they wrapped it up. The other thing, though, that's a bigger deal, because it's more of a character writing issue. And it's the sort of the Huey and Annie post like shapeshifter saga, right? You know, I enjoyed the moment where they all come back and Frenchie's still working on the virus and they all look hell because they've been through hell. That's all great. And I do appreciate Huey kind of mimicking Billy with the way he says hello, because he's being awkward and he says hello, hello, and it's a little bit like Billy saying oi oi, or something to that effect. Right, but he's sort of masking his feelings in the moment because it's awkward, and it should be awkward, right? Don't get me wrong, I have no problems with this being awkward after what's just happened. We find out that it's been 10 days of the shapeshifter pretending to be Annie. I have no problem with her feeling weird about the fact that Huey's been having sex with someone who he thought was Annie, and maybe feeling a little bit miffed that he didn't just instantly realize it wasn't her. That maybe should be a bit hurt that it just wasn't instantly obvious to him, right? I would get that. I would understand that. Weird feelings all around. However, this scene is written for her to just immediately get mad at him for having sex with her. And he immediately starts to start apologizing and sort of defending himself. And it all just felt like a really weird like angle to take this from, because no one in the scene acknowledges that Huey has been sexually assaulted by someone pretending to be someone else. He himself never even brings this up, which feels like a really missed opportunity in the writing. It feels like they've missed the beat here by having him not feel violated by this. Because I would feel violated. I feel like most people would feel pretty violated if this happened to them. Obviously, yeah, you'd be concerned and feel weird about your partner knowing about it, and you'd have that sense of that sort of unwarranted guilt, perhaps, that, you know, in some ways it's my fault that I didn't notice. Like, again, I get some of the psychology of like him thinking maybe he is to blame in some way and whatnot, and her feeling weird that this all happened, and maybe feeling again miffed that he didn't instantly notice, and maybe that would make them feel, you know, both feel awkward in the situation. But she immediately starts being angry at him, and he immediately starts trying to defend himself and groveling effectively, and it just felt really weird, especially since Huey has been in some way sexually assaulted twice this season now. Between all the stuff in the cave, which, yeah, it veered a lot sillier, and, you know, he got saved before things got super bad, but between that and then this with the shapeshifter, it feels like he's had a bit of a roller coaster in the past few weeks. And Annie is just pissed at him, and don't get me wrong, there's parts of the scene that I don't hate. There's parts of the scene where Huey sort of says, hey, do you want to know how I realized it wasn't you? And he describes all the little things that tipped him off. It was the, you know, her finding the keys right away. It was her, you know, doing whatever. I can't remember what they all were. But it was all these little things, right? That all came flooding to him the second it clicked that maybe it's not her. And it's kind of a sweet moment, and that's all fine. But the other thing that really bugs me about this is that it leaves on this cold moment in this scene, right? They're not fixed. They're not happy. They're still cold. And again, I have no problem with them being weird for a while, because, yeah, it's a weird, awkward, complicated situation, right? No one's saying that they should just both be happy about it and move on with their lives. It is weird and complicated. But it actually bothers me almost a little bit more how quickly it seems to be fixed in another scene, just a little bit later in the episode, where I'm like, you went through that to set up that she's mad at him, and then you just quickly had it go away, right? She just kind of makes a little line about him getting tested because she doesn't want syphilis, implying that they're still going to be together. Huey smiles, and it's over. Now, don't get me wrong. People might say to that, yeah, but you're ignoring the context of, you know, what happens right before she says that, right? And yes, I get it, because I actually really like the rest of that scene. It's maybe, you know, it's a big part of the episode. It's bringing Huey back to his purpose on the show, which is that he is the moral center, and he makes a speech about how they should make this deal with Newman. Wants to make a deal at this point in the episode, right? I'll talk about like the rest of her stuff in a bit, but Newman wants to make a deal. She's phoned Huey because she's realized that Homelander's a freaking psychopath, and Homelander threatened her daughter if she doesn't play ball, and that's the line that, you know, has put her over the edge. And she's here. She's wanting to work with the boys. And Huey presents this to the group, and Annie's like, "Are you crazy?" Everyone's basically got that reaction, although she's the most vocal. And Huey makes this great speech about how we are better than them, right? You know, we're not here to revel in violence. This isn't a Vought movie, right? We the only way we can defeat monsters is by is starting to act human, right? Right. The only way we'll ever defeat the monsters is by being human, and that's a great line, right? That's a great line of dialogue, and it convinces MM. MM says, "Yeah, you know what? We're pushed into this corner. At least we can go out as the good guys. We can go out as people doing the right thing," and that kind of convinces Annie. And yes, I like the idea that Annie basically rekindles with Huey because she's reminded in this moment of why he is so great, of why she fell in love with him in the first place, because he is this purely good person who just made this inspirational speech that convinced them all to do the right thing. And if nothing else, that's something to be cherished, and it's something that, so like that part of it I do like. I like kind of the setup before, but because this scene is almost the very next scene with Annie after the last time she was mad at him, it felt like we did the whole we're building up her being mad at him as unjustifiable, I think, as it might be, or at least weirdly kind of unbalanced as it was at the very least. And then the very next scene with Annie, Huey makes this great speech, and then that's it. She makes this one line, that's it, over. The drama's done. Which is part of why I had said this shapeshifter stuff feels a bit rushed. Because it is traumatizing. What has happened to them here? It's absolutely traumatizing, but we don't have time to really revel in it all that much because we have to move on with other things that the finale's doing. So, yeah, mixed feelings on some of that stuff for sure. Huey's speech itself, though, and the general idea of his speech and what he's trying to convince them of is great, especially since when you look at the other side of this plot, right, and you look at Butcher, and this idea that he is resisting that dark voice in his head that's, Kepler, and it's this, you have to go full, dark Butcher mode and start doing bad things and be ruthless, be aggressive, accept no prisoners, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, we're doing the right thing. And he tries to do the right thing. He even has like a moment where he says goodbye to Huey on the phone and says, tell the boys I'm sorry. It's almost like he's allowing himself to die as a good person instead of switching to this monster that he could become to achieve what he always wanted to. And he'd rather die a good person and convince Ryan to be good. And this feels like a lot of lessons have came from Huey in this sense. And he tries this, and it's not until it completely falls apart where it feels like he's left with this no option to turn to Kepler and let him take over that side of his personality, whatever we want to call this. And he goes, full villain, and we see what his powers are now and all the rest of it. Like, I like how thematically that ties in with Huey's speech. I really do. I also appreciate a lot of these moments with Ryan. I appreciate that Butcher's actually being the sensible one. Mallory's there, of course. It's the first time I think we've seen her this season. We saw her on Gen V before this season, but it's been a while since we saw her on this show, I think. And she wants to just rush and tell Ryan stuff and explain, hey, we have to get you away from the tower because, the Homelander, he's not who you think he is. And Butcher cuts her off and tries to take it slowly. It's almost like Butcher's learned a lot, and he's actually trying to ease Ryan into it. He understands that what they're about to unload on him is a lot, and he's trying to ease him in, and it feels like he's doing it the right way. Ryan even suggests playing a game, and that's what they did back in maybe the best episode of the season, at least from this plot's perspective, with him and Ryan and them being good for each other. It was as they were playing board games and foosball and whatever else, and they're playing Connect 4, and it's like, it's working. And Mallory's looks confused, like, wait, this is like an interesting tactic, Butcher, but we'll see how it goes. But then, of course, once the assassination attempt fails and all the stuff starts going down, Mallory throws in the towel and says, no, we have to just tell him everything now. And she does. She says that Homeland is a monster, that he's killed people, and ultimately, and Butcher tries to stop her, says that Homelander raped his mum, right? That's what it all builds up to. And he can't, it's too much, too quick. Butcher, I think, was sensible enough, and it's weird to say that about Butcher, but I think that's showing that he'd grown somewhat. Couldn't, Mallory stepped in and was the one that made the mistake. She was the Butcher in this scene, in a weird way. And it ends in Mallory's death. She tries to stop Ryan from leaving, and Ryan pushes her against the wall. Joe, I watched this yesterday, right? And I ended up not recording for various reasons, and I sort of I rewatched specific scenes before I sat down to record to refresh my memory and just sort of have another look at some things. And this was one of the scenes that I sort of let play for the most part. And I think when I first saw this yesterday, I felt kind of underwhelmed that this was the end or the conclusion to the Ryan and Butcher sort of plot of the season, right? Because I've been liking that a lot. This idea of like trying to save him, save his soul, and make him be a good person, and do it the humane way of teaching him right from wrong, of connecting to him on a human level. Because I felt like it was a little contrived just to get him to kind of turn to the other side for a while, because we have to have him be in a bad place for season 5 until the ending, where presumably he will be convinced to stand up against Homelander. And that's all fine to an extent. But it did feel a little contrived to get there, and it did feel like, I don't know, I was expecting more out of it, I guess, and maybe it just felt a little too easy to make Ryan turn bad. Not that he's turned fully bad, but he certainly doesn't show the same remorse for pushing Mallory that he would have done early in the season. Which is actually one of the things that I do like about the scene, is that it's very much a much more personal and darker version of that scene from earlier in the season when he pushes the stuntman. And it's really big over the top, and he goes flying into the wall, and there's blood splatter, and it's silly, and it's funny, and we all kind of enjoyed it. Here, it's a lot more intimate. It's a small space. It's not as spectacular looking. It's just the raw horror of what he's done. And I think his reaction afterwards is interesting to read, because it doesn't look like he shows any signs of real guilt this time. And I think part of this that I do like is this idea that he is, maybe for the first time, used his powers to stop something that he didn't want to deal with in like a really unhealthy way. In the same way that Homelander uses his powers, right? Where he's been confronted with all these ugly truths that he doesn't want to accept, and he basically realizes that even if he doesn't mean it in the moment of the push, he's realized that he's gotten away with just putting them in a bottle, because now Mallory's not there to keep confronting him. So he gets to just walk away from his problems and not deal with them like a mature person, like an adult. Not he's an adult yet, but you know what I mean. So I like that element of it, certainly. I think I'm just a little underwhelmed with kind of how easy it was to sort of get this sort of direction out of him and make him turn this way, and how quickly it seemed to happen in the episode. Those things still feel me leaving a bit underwhelmed. When I stopped and sort of thought about it and analysed it a little bit, I do like more of it than I thought I did. How it links back to the earlier scene where he pushed someone, how this is him using his power and realising that he's effectively taken away something that was making him uncomfortable, and how unhealthy that is if you actually stop and look at it, that he's, instead of dealing with this uncomfortable truth, he's pushed it away. He's killed someone for it, literally. But he's pushed it away and is now not going to deal with it. And it's repressed now. But at the same time, I feel like the sentence that Homelander did what he did to his mother, it feels weird for him to potentially just try and ignore that and just not accept it as truth. I don't see why he would think they're lying. I think that's the part of it that really bugs me, is that it feels a bit contrived to have him just immediately be like, I don't believe you. Especially since the way Billy looks at him after Mallory says it, it's almost like without saying a line of dialogue, Ryan looks over at Billy, and this is a good bit of acting actually. Billy just gives him this glance and sort of looks down as if to say it's true. Which makes me almost think that he does know it's true and just doesn't want to admit it. And obviously, characters in this show not dealing with their feelings, Butcher being a key example of this, is a big part of it, so I get it. Like, I get what they're going for. The execution here didn't completely come together for me. But regardless, not bad. Overall, there's definitely things in there I like. It's just not flawless, right? It's not something, I'm just not dancing in the rooftops screaming about how great it is. I think it's a bit more of a mixed bag than that. But this does lead to, of course, Billy showing up. They're making the deal with Newman. I love Zoe and Kimiko just like giving each other the side eye, like they're ready to throw down because Kimiko's still mad about her arm from the first episode. But Billy comes in, says no deals, and I will say I did really like the performance here from Karl Urban. He's really selling the idea that he's different. There's a moment where Hughie goes up and says, "Hey, I'm asking you to trust me for once, like you trusted Lenny." And the way Butcher turns to look at him, I thought was an inspired choice, because he didn't just sort of quickly snap like, how dare you invoke my brother's name? It wasn't like that at all. It really does feel like another sort of separate personality's almost taken over in a sense. But instead, he kind of slowly turned at him. It was a bit more almost menacing in a weird way, especially for the audience, because we know that he's different. We know, and obviously, yeah, this is kind of like fixed his illness in a way, like by letting the V tumor take over. It's kind of interesting in a sense, but which suggests to me, I hate to draw parallels to Star Wars, but I'm almost getting the vibe here that what's going to happen, and spoilers for Return of the Jedi, just in case you've not seen it or unfamiliar with how that story ends, but it does kind of feel like we're going to get a bit of a Darth Vader thing with Billy now, where he's going to be full Dark Billy for most of the season, but he will return to like real like mature Billy who's grown over the seasons, to have some goodbyes in the finale, maybe do something good right before he finally, clocks out. But this will effectively keep him alive for most of the season. But as soon as he's back to being good again, that means he's back to dying again. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, he's got tentacles that come out, and he rips Newman in half. Big, glorious, bloody scene, fun stuff. Yeah, this idea that Huey was about to do the deal, and it was coming from this good place of doing the right thing, of doing the thing that's not violent, only for Butcher to be the one to walk in and ruin it, like he would have done from season 1, right? The idea that he wouldn't let this go, and he would come in and do what he wants with it, and which of course makes that final line as he walks out, "You're effing welcome," with the smirk. Perfect. It's like he's not just season 1 Butcher, he's like Uber season 1 Butcher. Like I say, he's Dark Butcher, whatever you want to call him. So yeah, the symbolism of that Huey was almost about to achieve this through a means of peace, and then Butcher ruined it, is I think is a big thing for the show, and sort of harkens back to that push and pull of like him trying to be the good influence on Butcher. And it kind of makes that scene where he says almost goodbye and, "Will you please go to that topless steakhouse for me?" Because me and my brother wanted to go. I'm just imagining the scene where Huey sits down with Annie and says, "Hey, okay, I promised Butcher that after he died that we'd go to this steakhouse with topless women. I know it's weird to go there as a couple, but please just come with me." I hope that's a post-credit scene at the end of season 5. I hope there's a mid-credit scene of Annie and Huey just sitting in a steakhouse with topless waitresses serving them big steaks. Silently, not a word is uttered, and they just look awkward, and that's all it is. I want it in my life now. Give it to me. So yeah, so Butcher takes the virus, which Frenchie at this point had developed. So Butcher's got that, and we'll see what he can do with that next season, I guess. Yeah, and to go back a little bit to some other Newman stuff, obviously she had the big scene on the show where Homelander outs her as a soup. And when she's refusing to take the hint and admit what she is, he just lasers her in the face, and she's completely fine, and everyone freaks out. I don't have too much to add, really. It's a solid scene. It's pure peak Homelander, and it really is the start of she's made a deal with the devil here, and she's starting to realize this is really, really bad. It's also the scene where she's basically like, "Hey, you realize if you're going to go through with all this and change all the rules so that I can't get impeached, then you're going to have to like arrest half of the country and half of the people that work at Vought." And Homelander's like, "Yeah, I knew that. I thought of that." But that leads to some scenes later on where he's basically enlisted everyone else to go around killing everyone on a list that Ashley made for him, right? Ashley is asked to make this list of anyone who has dirt on the Seven, but especially Homelander. And he gives the order to the others, Deep, Black Noir, Firecracker, to go around killing all these people. And it really feels like, this is where the satire of the show is going to the extreme of saying this is how bad things could get, right? This is how bad things can get if one side tries to take over and really makes a play for power. They're going to seize it. And let's not ignore the fact that all of this is taking place on January 6th. That was not an accident. They knew what they were doing. So just letting that sit there, and just well I remember it, because it won't come up in any other way, because we don't see A-Train for the rest of the episode. but they mentioned canceling his movie at the start on the news, even though it's been finished, which I already thought was funny because I got the reference to the the Warner Brothers like shelving the Batgirl in the Acme movie, but but then it cut to Ashley actually saying, "Yeah, we realized we just make more money if we just shelved it for tax reasons." And I started laughing because it was a very industry reference, but obviously these are all people working in the movie and TV industry, so they're making a jab at something close to home with that one. But yeah, so we get a scene of them killing these various people. I don't have too much to add. There is one scene of of the Deep like crying and having flashbacks of his octopus. I don't really care. I like the octopus subplot was mildly amusing, but ultimately didn't add too much. They really didn't have a whole lot for the Deep to do this season. It was fine in the scenes with Sage to establish Sage's character, but otherwise, like, he didn't really have anything of his own this season. He had a couple of scenes with Black Noir II giving him advice, who gets a boner after killing someone, whatever. Kelly and Ashley too, actually, the second Ashley, which is the main thing I want to talk about here. Well, there's two main things. I should mention that Firecracker's kind of sick because of the med she's taken to produce the milk, and Homelander makes her sit far away. I don't know, other than making her feel alienated in that moment, I don't know if we're maybe suggesting that one way we're going to get to Homelander next season is by dosing her with something without her knowing about it, so her milk infects Homelander. Maybe that's where Billy will end up putting the virus. I don't know, but it felt like there were, because he's drinking the milk as she's coughing, and he kind of puts it down. And I wonder if we're seeing something there. The main thing, though, is that Homelander says Ashley's a good girl, thanks her for doing a good job, but as soon as she leaves the room and Homelander explains why they're killing everyone on this list, the Deep turns and says, surely Ashley knows more about us than anyone else, maybe she should be on this list. And Homelander just goes, yeah, good thinking, that's a good idea. And Ashley can hear this from the other side of the door, so she just bolts it to Homelander's room, his apartment, which is in the building, and she goes for the compound V because she knows where it is. We had that scene earlier with the A-Train where she caught him, and she injects herself with compound V to save her ass. The idea being that if she's got superpowers, then she can't be easily killed, or at the very least maybe oh, I'm one of you now, so there's no point in killing me, I'm part of the team. But yeah, we don't see what powers she gets. We see her writhing in pain. She kind of holds her stomach. I don't know what they're where they're going to go with this, but that's actually the last time we see her in the episode. There's a couple of things like that. I think there's a couple of things that feel like they wrap up kind of quickly here. The other thing for me being kind of the Frenchie and Kimiko romance thing. It felt like not a whole as I was watching the first half of the episode, I was kind of thinking, okay, Frenchie's just in the lab making the virus. He's very separate from everyone else. It really does feel like what he's been through this season has not really been that important. The only little thematic link to it that did work in the scene itself, it didn't really justify all the time that I felt we wasted on the boring subplot. But, when Huey's making his speech about forgiveness and how that's brave, right? And then that kind of extends to forgiving yourself, and that leads to the scene with Kimiko and Frenchie, where she admits that she was lying earlier in the season about not having feelings for Frenchie. She just thinks that he deserves someone better than her. It's the whole thing. And again, I like the idea that Huey's speech kind of inspired both of them to think about this a bit more, and Kimiko makes this declaration because of it, and they have their first kiss, and it's a nice enough scene. I just wish that I cared about how they maybe built or didn't build this throughout the season. Because all of the Frenchie stuff was by far the worst thing, at least in terms of a long-running thing throughout the season. All of his scenes in the first 6 episodes were by and large stuff that I just was okay, that's just as padding. We've done this dance before. It's just almost a shame that they just didn't, they didn't have to do a whole lot to set up this romance moment, because that chemistry and that sort of will they won't they has been there for some time. In fact, we had that scene where she has the musical number last season, after a kiss when she was human for a bit. That was a whole thing. I think my bigger problem, though, is how much of a waste I felt her speaking for the first time was at the end of the episode. Obviously, they set up at the start of the season that she was taking therapy, and that was to try and help with her speaking, right? Because it's a psychological problem. Okay, they set it up. That is something that she's thinking about, is something that's on her mind. But I also think that it wasn't focused on enough, maybe as much as it should have been throughout the season. It feels very much like, okay, you set it up, but that's all you did. You raised the question in like episode 1, and I felt like it was barely maybe touched upon. I mean, she mentioned that why she didn't speak when she explained her backstory to Frenchie, but I don't know. It didn't feel like it had as much sort of build up to me. It didn't feel like it was a prominent question on my mind with the character as the season was going along. I almost forgot it was even a thing until I was reminded by it happening. And the fact that, much like Annie just getting her powers back in like a sort of relatively small moment in the montage before they get attacked, Kimiko yelling no and screaming as Frenchie's taken away, like the actual content of the scene is solid, and I get that Frenchie being in trouble being the emotional like thrust to make her finally speak for the first time, but they only just like had their first kiss, and I get that they've had a big history, but they've been so separate from each other emotionally this season that it felt a little bit like, maybe if the kiss had landed better because I was more into their character stories, get into that moment, maybe this final moment would have landed more for me. It felt just like a sort of, oh, we just wasted it on this moment kind of feeling to me. I actually couldn't believe they just had that at the end like that. It felt like more should have been made of it, much like Annie getting her powers back. It just felt like such a small moment comparatively. Very strange. The ending of the episode for the main characters is that they basically all split up to travel away. MM's presumably going to go and see his family. Annie and Huey are driving off together. Kimiko and French are leaving together. But of course, Homelander is now in power because they've enacted martial law. They've blamed the president for the assassination of Newman. They've got a recording of him saying that they were trying to kill her, which they technically were, but for, better reasons than the public know, at the very least. So, and, that all leads to all the characters get on the run. And notably, we have various super characters show up. We have a couple of Gen V characters show up for Frenchie and Kimiko. We get, Kate's powers where she can just make Frenchie walk into the van. It feels like they're specifically detaining all the humans, right? Because they get Huey, they get MM. Love Sausage gets MM. In fact, MM gets slapped in the face with the sausage. It's quite dire. But, the supers. I mean, Kimiko doesn't get away per se. She's still kind of grabbed. It's that character, actually. I can't remember her name, but the one that comes after Huey and Annie was from season 2, from the soup hospital, right? I don't remember her name, but she had like the Magneto telekinetic powers. But so they get Huey, and Annie. But Huey basically gives the sort of the look to Annie to say, "Hey, just get away. You can't fight this on your own." And Annie just got her powers back in the car, so. Obviously, they had set up earlier in the season that she was trying to learn to fly with her powers, and she was hovering for a bit. At the end of this episode, and I like this. This was a great shot. She takes off like Iron Man, right? She basically just like has thrusters coming out of her hands with a glow and flies off. That's cool. Like, I'm cool for her being super powered. Like, even more so next season. That's fine. I think. I like what's happening overall here at the end. I like all the humans are being nabbed. Because Homelander's now in this position of power where he's basically controlling the government. They've got supers militarized and deputized to like police everywhere. We're getting into some really, really dark times, and it's going to give us a great, awful world for our heroes to fight through and win next season. But there's just these little things in some of the send-off moments that felt a little bit rushed for my taste. So... yeah, broadly speaking, what I said last week is that it's more of a prelude to season 5 than a satisfying season on its own. And I think that's true. I think you could condense this down by a couple of episodes probably and not feel like we've lost anything of value. I think a lot of the Frenchie subplot you just get rid of. There's probably a few other things you can maybe nip out as well. As much as, like, I get that Huey's dad's whole thing was like a motivation for him to keep being good. I don't know if it was needed. I know he directly mentions in his speech that, you know, he chose to forgive his mother as well as A-Train. But here's the funny thing. I cared more about him forgiving A-Train than his mother, because his mother was just a bit of backstory, but A-Train's, like, what A-Train did to him was the start of the show. That means something to me as an audience member. So that felt like a big deal that he forgives him. Admittedly, how do you get to that without the plot with the dad? I don't know. But certainly that was also some of the stuff early in the episodes that I was finding a little bit separate and not as good as the rest of the show. So I don't know how you necessarily recut or rewrite it a little bit to take some of those things out, but it did feel a little bit more padded than other seasons, right? Maybe a little less focused. I think all the things that it's set up for the final season are pretty great. I think this final season could be special whenever we get it, probably in 2026, given the time it takes to get these things done. But, you know, like there's definitely some critiques to be had. I think it is the weakest season overall. I don't think it's as good as 1, 2, or 3. I think 2 and 3 are my two favorite seasons. I think 1 is really good and solid, but 2 and 3 kind of took everything to the next level. And then this was a bit more muddy overall in terms of pacing, in terms of some character choices, in terms of just not really having its own definitive focus that could end by the end of the season, because ultimately it was about getting Billy to this point at the end. But even some of Billy's plot where he's talking to Kepler in his head felt a little bit like, okay, we're doing that trope, right? And some of it was all right, some of it was good, and I like the end point of it and like this sort of giving into it to sort of set us up for this final season. But the journey wasn't always the most exciting or interesting with that particular plot on its own. Had its moments for sure, but it wasn't always great on its own. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. The other thing I suppose, maybe a slight disappointment, is the Sage stuff. Just because I feel like they did the most simple, basic thing they could have done with her, which is basically she walks in at the, you know, towards the end of the episode. Homelander thinks they've lost everything, but then, you know, the final pieces of the puzzle, which is framing the president for the murder of Newman and destabilizing the government so that everything has to be stepped in on and, you know, they can take control. Sage basically just walks in and says, yeah, this was the plan. I knew this would all happen. I was right, you're welcome. Next time, listen to me. And Homelander does seem taken aback a bit that she's still helping him. But maybe he's learned a lesson now. But it did kind of feel like, okay, you're telling me that she was prepared for all of this? That's fine. But at a certain point, her intelligence starts to feel more like she's a Nostradamus than it is just about being intelligent, right? Knowing that the shapeshifter would fail in the assassination attempt and that they would get a neat recording of the president implicating himself is very, very specific in a way that feels, I don't know, like she was so disconnected by these last couple episodes because she get kicked out that it just felt a little bit like okay, sure. She saw all this coming. I guess that's the problem with writing a character who's meant to be this smart, is that there is a line where, is that actually intelligence or just you've read the script in advance and know what's coming up? Because it's hard to believe you could predict this quite as much as you could. So I think there's a balancing act to play with there with her character, especially if we're going to do more with her next season. But I did find this scene of her coming in and being like, yep, this all went down like I thought, to be a bit underwhelming in a sense of like, okay, you're saying this is like she knew all this because she's super smart, but this feels like you didn't write something that convinced me that she had all these puzzle pieces in play and knew it was all going or something. I don't know. I found that a little bit underwhelming, but I mean, by all means, let me know if you had anything else you would add on to that. Okay, I think there's probably something I've forgotten to talk about, but that's, I think, most of the stuff that I feel compelled to talk about. One of the things that I've started doing is doing a scene of the week kind of thing at the end of a review. So, scene of the week's interesting here. I think for me, it probably has to be Huey's speech. Because that him being the heart of the show and convincing them to not take the dark path is such a core element of what this show is to me. And I think it works really well by and large. The little bit at the end where it just kind of like cleans up the Annie's mad at him stuff notwithstanding, I still think that's the standout scene for me in the show. So that's my pick for the scene of the week. So yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on the Boys season finale. Obviously, we'll have Gen V season 2 before we get back to the Boys. I know they just started filming that, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode and indeed the season as a whole in the comments. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. I've got a pimple coming in there. I just noticed it on the camera. Thank you very much, though. Hopefully you had some fun with my thoughts and the season overall, even if it wasn't quite on par with the prior seasons. But hey, see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?